coming out on the 19th. I know it's a busy shopping day for people, so I appreciate that you are all here. Today we're going to have Jacob Stanley and Titus Kaphar talk and speak and have a conversation. We'll leave some time afterwards for a Q&A. With the Q&A, just make sure you have a question, right? So it's not that's restating the obvious, but it makes things work a lot better. I heard Titus speak not so long ago at the Association of Art Museum Directors, which I happened to be head of for a period of time, and it was really inspirational. And so a friend of Jason, and Jason called me up the other week and was like, hey, Titus is in town, why don't we do something? So we decided to do something. One of the things I noticed is that Titus is from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. Ken Montague grew up in Windsor, which is almost Michigan. Somebody in the audience here is from Detroit, so it's like, all right, yeah, there we go. So we have multiple people here, right? And that cross-border conversation is important, a little difficult at moments. We do like to talk at the beginning of our talks to talk a little bit about where we are, and Toronto is based on the land of Mississauga, the credit. It's also Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Seneca Nations. So there's lots of people from lots of different places, and many of them are indigenous. Just a little shout out to 6 nations of the Grand River. How many of you have ever been out there? Okay, so here's something to do. Oh yeah, great, we got one person. So 6 nations is about an hour and a half, 2 hours with traffic by Brampton. Sorry, not Brampton, Brantford, excuse me. And it's a site of one of the residential schools, and they've just renovated it, and it is a super powerful experience. It will ruin your day, but it's super meaningful to do it. So go online, Woodland Cultural Center, and it kind of helps understand the layers of history here in a pretty profound way and a really smart way. So just encourage you to do that because it makes it a little more real. Jacob Stanley, he's come here from Yale recently. He was a decade or so as a professor there. He's written over 7 books. I'm sure he's working on another one. He's the Bissell Hyde Chair of American Studies at the Munk School of Global Affairs. And he basically does philosophy of language. And he does cross-cultural things quite a bit, so cross-disciplinary things too. So he'll be in the epistemology of language, and then he'll jump to art history and bring that in. So super smart, enjoyed getting to know him recently. So he's going to be in conversation with Titus Kaphar, so as I mentioned, from Kalamazoo, painter, really looking at history pretty deeply and African-American subjects in history and kind of how paintings always lie on a certain way, and you can reframe those stories, they tell different stories. And I love how rigorous he is on the history of art, but he clearly also has his perspective just contributing to that. He's not just a painter, he's a filmmaker, a sculptor, an installation artist. He founded an extraordinary nonprofit, which I hope he talks about a little bit, in New Haven, Connecticut, also a MacArthur Genius Grant winner. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I'm not gonna say too much because I want them to have the conversation. So over to you guys.
So Titus, much to discuss. It's been 11 years since I met you, and we've gone through in that time the so-called racial reckoning, which didn't work, and now we're going through the backlash to the racial reckoning. And I want to cover both of those things with you and what you've been a central figure in the so-called racial reckoning. And now I think you're going to be a central figure in the fight against the backlash. But before we get into that, let's start with, I want to start locally. So I met you in 2014 in a cafe, East Rock Coffee, and I had just was supposed to see your show, did your own project, but then missed it, and then ran into you just totally accidentally in New Haven. And you told me about a project you were doing in New Haven that you had bought like a 20,000 square foot something, and you wanted to make New Haven the center, you wanted to create art. I don't know, it sounded totally off the hook, and I was like, okay, this is like someone very ambitious, but also someone untethered from reality. So could you talk a little bit about Next Haven and what it, I should say, just The New York Times put New Haven on the 54 best places to visit in the world. And basically the reason was Next Haven. This was many years later. So you want to talk a little bit about Next Haven?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. So Jason and I have known each other for a long time, and it's going to be very difficult for me to have this fully serious conversation up here. So it's probably going to be rambling, but it'll be fun to watch, I hope. So I started Next Haven after I graduated from Yale and then moved to New York, lived there for 2 years, and then moved back to New Haven after my wife and I started our family. I went to Yale and had that Yale experience, the experience where you are in the city but disconnected from the people of that city. That town-gown classic relationship is something that I experienced while I was there. And when I came back after, that was when I realized that I was living in a great city with great people and a great community. And so I decided to start this project called Next Haven, NXTHVN, and we support young artists. So we focus on artists of color from all over the world. We give them studio space, we give them housing, we give them a stipend, and then I've designed a curriculum with my business partner around the business of art. You can go to art school at Yale, Columbia, or wherever you go here, and the likelihood that you're gonna have a conversation about how you pay back those student loans, although here you might not have student loans. No one tells you about that. And so we wanted to make sure that we created a program that was realistic about helping people pay back that debt as artists. So we've been going for about 7 years now, and the program is completely international. We're getting people from all over the world. We get about 1,000 applications, and we select 9 each year. So.
Yeah, I mean, I should, so New Haven, Connecticut, like many American cities, is incredibly segregated. There's sort of an all-white neighborhood that's wealthy, and Titus, you chose to put Next Haven and Dixwell. You want to talk a little bit about that? Like what?
I mean, it felt like home. You know, I'm from Michigan, and when I was looking for an apartment when we moved to New Haven, we ended up Beaver Hill, Dixwell neighborhood, and at the time, Yale was discouraging people from getting apartments in that neighborhood, which is very problematic, actually. You know, they said our shuttles don't go over here. There will be no support. You're gonna have to figure all that out yourself. But at the end of the day, as I said when I showed up there, it felt like home. People felt comfortable to me. And even though it was a quote unquote poor neighborhood, I think what I saw most was it was just underinvested in. People were not willing to invest in that community. So my partner and I bought this 20,000 square foot building. We worked with Deborah Burke, the Dean of the School of Architecture at Yale, who was just a good friend and working outside of the institution itself to be able to do wonderful things in the city. And we turned it into a 45 square foot building in the heart of the Dixwell neighborhood, which is a historically Black neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that has so much history that nobody knows. So the Underground Railroad, goes through that neighborhood. One of the biggest jazz venues in Connecticut was in that neighborhood. Billie Holiday plays there, Miles Davis plays there. There's no signs, nothing, telling you that you're in that kind of place. Deindustrialization completely devastated that community. And in many ways, that was part of what reminded me of Michigan.
And you characteristically haven't even mentioned the mentoring program with high school students.
Yeah, I mean, that's my bag, because that's probably the most exciting part of the whole program. So when I started my private art practice, I was in that neighborhood already. And there were our neighbors and a few other young men who would be hanging out on the corner, and I would see them every day. And one day I finally said to them, which one of you wants a job? Y'all are out here every single day. Which one of you wants a job? And everybody in the group raised their hand and said me. And so I brought them into the studio and I was like, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to stretch canvas. I'm gonna teach you how to gesso canvas. And I just started creating these jobs for them. And so they knew if they need a little extra cash, they could come. They call me Mr. T because they don't know about the 18. They said, you can go to Mr. T and get a little bit extra cash, but you gotta work. If you don't work, he will kick you out of the studio. And so that kind of became the framework for the program that we started at Next Haven. So every artist in our program works with a high school student who is their apprentice. Those apprentices get paid to work with them. And so these are kids from the high school neighborhood that come in. We start with them as freshmen and work with them all the way up until their senior year. And they get to learn art by being in the studio with artists. So.
Okay, let's start talking about the work. So the work you do is sort of characterized by, it's classical, right? And we're gonna start with this piece now. So it draws, obviously it draws our attention to a certain period of time, to classical representations of the 19th century in the United States, done in this beautiful, lush manner, but you've adopted them in a certain way, and this became your sort of mantra during the racial reckoning time from Ferguson to Black Lives Matter in 2020 when people were taking monuments down. And you had a different reaction to that. Do you want to talk about that different reaction and bring in this piece, Shadows of Liberty, into that reaction? This is not, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mean classical and like classic, not actually in the piece.
No, yeah, sorry, I'm a philosopher.
Yeah,
Classical
I
means
need to
Greek
be
for us.
clear.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, I saw the disappointed frown.
I showed that. I was trying to hide it. Okay, so I would try to connect those two things. I think because y'all are looking at this image, I'll start with the image. You know, my work is often talked about in these kind of social political frameworks, and there's certainly truth to that. That is to say, I understand that that's the way that they work in the world. But that's not what makes me go to the studio to make something. I say this all the time, when I'm in the studio working on something, y'all don't exist. I don't think about you, you don't matter to me. I'm so sorry, that's offensive, but it's true. I find that if I am in my head about what you're thinking about what I'm gonna make, I'm usually making something bad. And so I had this practice at the beginning of my career where I would start the day by sweeping you all out of my studio. Like this was this figurative act to sort of manifest what I felt was happening in my head. And that gave me the space to be able to make this stuff. So I say that to say how the work exists in the world after it's made is one thing, and I'm quite clear about that. But the things that motivate me to make the work when I'm in the studio are wholly, wholly different. This painting, for example, this started based on a conversation I was having with my grandmother. My grandmother grew up in Mississippi, and my family, like many families at that time, was kind of chased out of Mississippi because of KKK. Was after my grandmother's sister. And so they left Mississippi in the dark of night and ended up in Michigan. And my grandmother would tell this story about our family being enslaved on Mount Vernon, George Washington's plantation. And I said, Grandma, that don't make no sense. Because everybody knows that we've been in Mississippi for as long as anybody can remember. That's in Virginia. And she's like, no, trust me. And I was pretty dismissive of my grandmother, which is shameful, and I'm completely embarrassed of it because she's rarely been wrong in my life. So I was like, fine, you know what? We live in an age where we can just do this research now, Grandma. So I'm gonna go look and see what we find. And as I started the research, as I started looking, I found these so-called slave ledgers. And I found our family names on there. So I was like, I don't know how that transition happened, but maybe Grandma's right. But more than that, I found individuals, I found people and children. And as I was doing the research, I felt overwhelmed by that, by the number, in this case 350 or so, names of individuals whose liberty was taken from them as America was becoming America. And so the first thing I did was I got an 11-foot canvas and I just started painting all of those names. Basically, I just made the slave ledger and painted all of those names by hand. I wanted some way to memorialize them. And obviously, I'm coming across my own family member's name and just this meditation of writing those names as a way to remember seemed significant and important. As I was making that piece, that painting, I went to the Yale Art Gallery and I saw these Nkisi sculptures, these West African sculptures. And there's a power to them. I don't know how else to say it, it's just power to them. And I started talking to some of the curators about what these nails meant. And in some of these sculptures, these nails are kind of, they can be a memorial to an agreement made between two people. They can be evidence of the faith of an individual. In other words, people believed in these objects to change their lives, believed that these objects have the power to change their lives. And so I found myself just thinking about those power figures and their relationship to, our founding fathers in the United States as power figures. And so I took those names and I started nailing them to George Washington in this way. So when you're in front of the sculpture, every single one of those strips coming down is a line from the ledger and an individual's name or family on a single ledger line, their ages, and in some cases how much they were purchased for. And so for me, it was really this conversation about this hope, this faith that this particular power figure could have changed the destiny of all these people, although that's not what happened. So that's where this piece started. So I say that to say, I was motivated from this very personal place to jump into this work. It wasn't me going, hey, I want to make this political statement, let me go do this. It was like, my grandmother thinks this thing. Let me see if this is rooted in reality at all. So.
I feel we are always arguing about the personal.
Are you going to do this again?
So when I teach this piece in my propaganda, ideology, and democracy lecture, I pair it with Toni Morrison, who talks about how freedom in America is always, has long been understood in contrast to an unmentioned Black unfreedom. So you're calling this shadows of liberty is, okay, I like that. So once I asked you back then, before you sort of, one undercurrent of this, or an undercurrent, is how that will emerge as we talk, hopefully, is that when you read the people that the government is targeting, it sounds a lot like you. Like people.
I don't know why that's funny.
So when I first asked Titus, how come? So first of all, one thing to understand is there's no explanation of what this painting is in the Yale Art Gallery. So people, and I've talked to people like, do you know what this is? And like, no, but it's beautiful and wild. And so, no one is going to guess that these strips are the names of enslaved people. So I once asked Titus, why aren't you, targeted more? This was back 2016, 2017, whatever. And Titus, you said, because I didn't call it Piss Christ, I called it Shadows of Liberty. But now I think you're becoming more explicit, and we'll talk about the exhibition series that you're about to embark on in a bit. So, it's funny, I just, again, and this won't be the first time today that I will be annoyed at you for this, but, the reluctance to claim political intent, like Du Bois in Criteria of Negro Art says the Black artist should do paintings that evoke white ideals and then undermine those white ideals. And so, in that art.
Look, and then, can I just say that we have been having this same damn argument for 15 years?
No, I'm just
Y'all
thinking about
jumping in the
me.
middle.
I'm not thinking about white ideals.
No, I mean, look, I think I said this already, but if I take a didactic approach to what I do, if I go into the studio and I, in this incredibly condescending way, frame it like, I'm going to teach you about this historical thing that you don't know. First of all, I don't know what you know. So like, that's just a dumb pursuit from the beginning. Secondly, it really is about me trying to understand the world better and me trying to understand my position in the world. Now, I have a bunch of experiences being a black man raised in America that makes it pretty clear that the framing of these pieces is most certainly political, for sure. I'm just saying, as an artist, if I bring that with me into the studio, I destroy my practice.
Yeah.
Right? And so like, thank you. So, and I'm not the first person to say that. Like, Toni Morrison said that all the time. She had this great interview. This interviewer was asking her about like writing from other perspectives. And she essentially said the same thing I said. No, I'm not really thinking about that. I'm writing from this perspective for these people. That's what I'm doing. That's for me. And I don't have any interest in trying to prove that to you or do something for you that way. And what I do know is the result, after having done this for 20 years now, the result is when you are vulnerable and honest about your personal experience, and you're willing to speak that personal experience visually, publicly, you are going to touch other people, right? It's when I haven't had the opposite. I haven't had the thing where, like, I'm telling you, man, I at the beginning of my career, I did do that thing. This thing that you're describing, I did do that. I brought it into the studio with me. I tried to become the teacher. I was trying to teach all these lessons, help you guys learn all of this stuff. And inevitably, it doesn't work. What I realized is your experience with the work in front of you is often more motivating and inspiring to me than anything that I was thinking about when I was in the studio making work after I made it. The experience for me, I had this piece, one of my very first solo shows in New York. And I walked into the exhibition, it was the opening night, there were all these people here, and there was this woman and she was standing in front of one of my paintings. Now this painting was, painted in a classical style, and there was this woman sitting in the painting and her hands were folded and her hands were in her lap. Her face was really blurred out, almost abstracted and whitewashed in the way that I often do. But the hands were super realistic, hyper realistic. I wanted those hands to feel like they were jumping off the canvas. Now, I had a bunch of ideas, things I was thinking about when I was making that painting. I get to the opening and there's a woman standing at this painting. I look at her and go on and talk to other people, mingle along. Halfway through the opening, I see her, she's still in front of that painting. The end of the evening, she is still in front of that painting. Now, mind you, people don't look at paintings that long. On average, it's like 15 seconds if you're lucky. It's another reason why I can't be concerned with what you think. So she's standing in front of this painting, and finally at the end of the evening, I come up to her and I say to her, what's going on for you? How do you feel about this work? And the woman is literally in tears, and she says, my mother died recently, and I feel like I'm forgetting her face, but she was a laborer, and I will never forget her hands. Now you tell me, do you think in that moment I care what I was thinking when I made that painting? No, doesn't matter. I made something that connected to another human being in a way that I fully didn't expect. That's beautiful. That's like incredibly powerful. And it would be totally arrogant of me to disrupt her experience with that. Have that. I'm not gonna take that away from you. And that's what I'm saying. I would have never predicted that would have been anyone's experience as they're standing in front of me.
Okay, well, my reading of you is that you're saying correctly, you'd be terrible at delivering at having a political message. If you thought about the political message when you did it, it would be didactic. And Elaine Locke says this back to Du Bois in Art or Propaganda. The sin of artist propaganda is it's dull and didactic and preachy. So absolutely, but somehow you managed to pull it off. And I think you're explaining partly how you pull it off by not thinking about it when you're doing it. Okay, let's move to the next. Do you know how to do this?
Yeah, that big green button right
Oh. Okay, so this is one of a series of paintings you've done on this theme. Do you want to talk about this? Another big, this is a giant painting.
Yeah, I mean, when I was an undergrad, my minor was American history, with an emphasis on African American history. And so a lot of the things I read are about that. And I'm interested in the way that I was taught a particular series of lessons about George Washington and our founding fathers. And then as I got older and started reading other historians, realizing that all of this stuff is like, so much of that stuff is just made up. It's just like utterly made up, invented, sometimes whole cloth, totally invented. And yet that's what that's the country that I think my fellow citizens believe they live in. But it doesn't, it's not real. And so I'm wrestling with what's real. I'm trying to come to some understanding about like what actually happened, what actually went on, and how do I fit? I'm in a moment in my life right now where, for no reason at all, I'm very excited about being outside of the United States for no reason at all. But as I leave, I have a show in Paris coming up, by the way, if y'all want to come visit. I find myself just realizing that I don't know who I am as an artist outside of the frame of the country that I was born in. And I'm convinced that other things will evolve in my practice if I move out of this place and try to at least temporarily, because I mean, it's in me to some degree, but at least temporarily see myself outside of that, see my work outside of that, ask questions outside of that. Even this is a really wonderful exercise because I'm noticing in my head, I am perpetually reminding myself that's not their country, right? You keep saying our country, you keep saying here, that's not it. So even just this positionality of the way that I have to talk about the work is good for me, is important for me. And so this work is about coming to some understanding about those things that I adopted as a person who was taught, as a person who was born in the United States. And as we know, what we come to realize was this hidden history of so-called miscegenation, and this is a painting about it, about putting it up front and just looking at it and saying, this is the truth. And it's an important truth because Black people in the United States historically are not seen as beautiful, are not seen as desirable. And so for me to put this painting, these two paintings side by side and see what conversation emerges from that was a part of the practice. So this was from a long body of work that I did called Conversation Between Paintings. Sometimes what I would do is I would just make a single painting and then make another painting. And then after there were several paintings in the studio, I just push them together and sit down in my studio and just see what conversations happen between them. What are the things that get talked about? So that's another part of the attempting not to be so didactic about it, trying to be open to what the painting has to offer me in the process of making it.
Well, one of the things I think about when I look at this series is that interracial relationships were illegal until 1967. Whereas, so you put together these classical figures, but also show obviously, one of the things I wanted to say about your your comment based in America, you used to take your kids and my kids to the British Art Gallery at Yale to show me and them how British art represented Black people. We'll get to that, one of those pieces. I don't know if that's British, that's British, yeah. So I think you have theorized white supremacy. White supremacy has to be theorized to include European colonization. And I think that's something you did. You do think about. I mean, you have it we have one of those paintings.
Sure, let's talk about it.
Okay. Well,
This is the different.
This is different. You want to go right ahead to do you know how to go back on this machine? I'm a philosopher.
Okay. So I love taking kids to the museum. I really, really do, because they don't know and they don't give a shit. They're just gonna say whatever they think. And if they don't like it, they're gonna tell you that they don't like it. And I love that. I absolutely love that. So I would take our kids, we both have 2 boys, to the museum, and we would hang out there. Sometimes we would draw, and sometimes it would be just a conversation, like, what do you see happening in this painting? And so I realized really early on that the things that we see on the surface of the canvas they belie what's behind it. And they belie what it takes to get to this place. When I gave the talk that you were talking about earlier, I was asking people, the art historians in the room, what can we discern about this individual based on what we see in this composition? Y'all want to shout it out? Nobility.
Yellow. He looks ridiculous.
I don't think so. There's a nice style going on there.
We should take that seriously. He looks ridiculous. Okay. Continue.
I think so.
Continue.
Self-conscious.
Self-conscious. What about the landscape?
Yeah, looks like a
Landowner, right? So there's painting is a language. It's coded, and historically we are to understand something about this individual based on his composition. Usually, notice we're below him, right? We're looking up at him, right? Look at what he's wearing. That's not inexpensive clothing, right? The vest is silk. We can tell by the way that it glistens. It's not working in this photograph here so much, but it glistens. That didn't come from the United States, right? Where was he getting that silk? That speaks to his wealth. And look at the way that his arm is going back into the composition. He's pointing you to that landscape. That's his landscape. He owns that thing, right? So these are the things that we understand about the painting from looking at the composition. But I have been struggling with a way to communicate what's behind all of that in this subtle way. So I've been thinking about these paintings that I think about as Trojan horses, these drawer paintings, these paintings that are stacked, where we have a thing on the surface, but behind the painting, when you pull out this drawer behind the painting, you start to see other things. You start to think about the amount of labor that it takes in order to maintain these kinds of properties, to maintain these kinds of lifestyles, and you start thinking about the relationship between these people at this time. And what you get is a situation where the narrative totally shifts, right? And so for me, this body of work started after I made my film. I realized that in painting, I have a single scene. I have a scene to tell you the entire story. But in a film, I had Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And I wanted to find a way to allow the painting to unveil itself within Act 1 and Act 2 and Act 3. So,
this is the painting I was thinking about, which also fits into the, you have a series of these. So in the original, there's a white woman. In the original, there's a white woman there do you want to talk a little bit about the colors and what you explained to me when you painted this?
So this goes back to the conversations that we're having at the British Art Museum.
Yeah.
And looking at these Black figures and identifying with them, seeing myself in them, right? When I was an undergrad at San Jose State, we had one Black model the entire time for my figure painting class. So in terms of learning how to paint flesh tone, I know how to paint white flesh far better than I know how to paint Black flesh, because I wasn't instructed in that. If we look historically, there are literal manuals, step-by-step manuals to tell me how to paint white flesh, but not how to paint my own flesh. So when I'm in a museum and I see these Black figures that are in the background, I find myself drawn to them. I find myself thinking about, okay, how do I mix these colors? What am I using? Umbers, browns, reds, whatever, what is going on in this? And I'm always finding that these characters are often, bottom right-hand corner, left-hand corner of the painting. They're always in the same kind of roles, enslaved or impoverished. And I'm kind of trying to find a way to be able to look at them without having to lose myself in all of those issues that you're talking about. And so the simplest thing to do was remove the other figure. And that's what I did. It allowed me to focus on the young Black boy in this painting, and allowed me to work on the flesh tone. And then as I was doing that, I was beginning to realize that if I'm referencing these historical paintings, the way that they're painting Black flesh is without blood underneath. Usually, Black flesh reflects so much color from its surrounding, right? So if you have a blue light source, the way blue reflects on Black skin is it's special, it's very unique. But that's not generally how these characters are represented. It's very monochromatic. It's generally like umber and white, and it's more of a value scale than anything else. And so essentially what I started doing was I started looking at contemporary photography and putting it together with these paintings. And so what you see in this painting is this young boy no longer looking at that figure that was there, that's removed, and that becomes a window, and we're seeing into the present. So it's this idea of seeing through time, and again, that question, like, if this figure saw these kinds of representations of Black people in this moment, what would he think? What is the conversation that they would have between each other? What would each of them say about their times? These kinds of conversations I contemplate in great detail in my studio, sometimes even write them down. But those stories are often what motivate the next series.
I'm just going to pause and take a complete tangent, because if I don't tell the story, I'll forget. One time, Titus was at a party at my house, and was arguing, and this circle of people were arguing with him, and somebody came out and said, Titus is arguing that Florence, Italy is the greatest city in the world, and arguing against like 10 other people. But yeah,
let me state for the record that I do not remember that. But I do love Florence.
Okay, now we're going to get into sort of, you're an artist, I'm a philosopher, but our community was very involved, production-wise in politics in the United States for the past decade. Yeah. And we talked continuously. I taught your work while I was teaching that politics. We were writing op-eds. Everything in the United States. I think one thing that's distinctive about the United States is everything is about race. Every election is about race. No, that's not true in some other countries, but so I'm going to jump ahead after we go back to that and say so this was painted, this was in Time magazine after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. And you had the front cover of Time magazine as well. and this was inside. And there was a feeling of change when Michael Brown, when that happened, a slight feeling of optimism. I remember when George Floyd was killed years later, and it was COVID, and we were sitting on chairs, Julianne, and on our driveway, and you said, I can't do this again, and it just felt, it was like 5 years later, and he had been, So do you want to talk about, so this is going back to the beginning of that incredibly intense, decade.
Yeah, it's exhausting, man. And the more history you know, the harder it is to be optimistic about it. What I was saying is like, and we talked about this last night, and like America historically, particularly with the issue of race, goes through these progressions and regressions. And it's just a question of where are you in that cycle? We have the Civil War, then we have Reconstruction, and then everything falls apart after that. And I'm tired, man. I'm really, really tired of everything having to be framed in that way, necessarily for your survival. So when people see this painting, they generally think about Ferguson. And of course, that's what's happening in the world at the time. But the reality is, this painting is about me and my brother. I grew up in Michigan, as I mentioned before, and my family is still in Michigan. I have a lot of brothers, and my youngest brother, who I adore, but is involved in some illegal activities. And when he was young, my mother said to me that I needed to take him in, because he was getting into trouble and he was about to be 18 and it was about to be very serious. And she was like, I want him to come stay with you guys just for a few days. He needs to be out of town. Can he just stay with you? And I said, Mom, what are you getting me into? It was like, that's your brother, just like get him out of here. And so I did. I brought him to Connecticut with us. And as I always say, I love my brother, but at that time we had very little in common. My brother is interested, at that time, he's grown, in women and shoes. That's all he ever talked about, was women and shoes. And so when he came, I expected our conversations, as they were initially, to be about him telling me about these latest pair of Jordans and these women that he was interested in. And for about 2 days, that was the conversation, but on the third day, something changed, and he asked me what he's never asked me before. He said, I'd love to see some of your art. Can we go see some of your work? And I said, cool, yeah. I got to show up in New York right now. Let's drive to New York. So we drove to New York, and when we were in New York, I was expecting that we were going to just go to one art gallery, and then he was going to want to go to Harlem so we could look at women in shoes. But I was really surprised. He said, no, let's go to the galleries first. And we ended up walking in and out of galleries for 2 hours. This is in Chelsea, in New York. And we ended by going to my show, which at the time was at Freeman Bender Gallery. And I was supposed to have a conversation with my brother about him not getting into trouble. Mom was really scared, all this other stuff. And so after we had gone through all of these galleries and had these amazing conversations that we had never had before, we had never talked about the things that we were talking about, because that's what art does, right? It opens up space for conversations. We left the last gallery and we were walking out, and I said, okay, this is my opportunity to tell him all the stuff that Mom wants me to tell him. And literally, as I was working up the energy to tell him this, an undercover police car speeds up to us, and the police officers jump out of the car with their hands on their gun and tell us to get up against the wall. And they, at that point, are asking me for my ID, and I'm very confused because I'm really focused on my brother at that time. I'm in Chelsea, so there are all these collectors that are walking around while I'm like standing with my hands up against the wall, and they are, as I said, hands on their guns, making sure that we're not doing anything. They want to see our IDs. I'm upset, so I'm like, why are you stopping me? What is going on? They said, we've been following you for the last 2 hours. We've been getting complaints about 2 black men walking in and out of galleries stealing artwork. And I said, that's a lie, because if you had been following me for 2 hours, then you would know, number one, I didn't take anything. Number two, That's my artwork in the last gallery that we walked out of. So how could I possibly be stealing that? And I'm finding myself getting really angry, but because I'm a black man who grew up in the United States, who grew up in Michigan, I know what I'm supposed to do in this situation, but I'm mad. I'm really mad because I'm trying to deal with my brother here. I'm trying to help him avoid this very kind of situation. And so I asked the officers, I said, why is my citizenship different from that person's citizenship over there? Like, how come that person gets to go in and out of these galleries and there's no problem? And at that point, my brother's like, Ty, calm down, it's okay, calm down. The officer gives us back our IDs and finally says, I hope you never find yourself in a situation where you need the police. And, gets in the car and drives off. No more explanation. This is not the first time this happened. It's not the last time this happened. That's my experience. And so I'm tired. I'm tired of it. So when I have a situation like that, experience like that, I end up in the studio and I end up making things that reflect that experience. And of course, they're reflective of the world and what's happening at that time, but fundamentally, this is a personal story.
Yeah, it was not, this becomes, for many Americans, a visual representation of Ferguson. So,
and also that's not false.
no, right.
Right? I in no way am I saying that that's, as I said with the woman who saw the hands, right? Absolutely, yes. I believe in that. I'm just saying, when I'm in the studio, when I'm thinking about what I'm working through for myself, is oftentimes different.
So I want to move to Redacted for several reasons, not just because I love it, but also because it's a series of amazing stories about you working with Reginald Dwayne Betts, the poet. So there's a poet in New Haven, Reginald Dwayne Betts, who's also the chief poetry editor of the New York Times and a Yale Law School grad. And I introduced him. And then they ended up doing this project together called Redacted. And so Dwayne and his family went up to Maine. Is that right?
We went up to
You went up to Maine, and they joined you.
Yes.
And I would get these frantic phone calls, like, Jason, do you know of like a freedom font? Like a font that like anti-Nazis used in the 1930s. Like, no. I remember I called Tim Snyder, because he'd be the person who'd know about freedom. I think Tim actually had some suggestions. But you guys were working, really thinking about the details of, the collaboration was so intense, the amount of creativity that went in on both of your sides. So can you talk a little bit about this project?
Yeah, first of all, you did not introduce us. You had attempted to. You kept trying to. And I mean, this is a compliment to you, because I was like, no, Jason, I'm not meeting another one of your friends. I'm sorry. But then accidentally, Jennifer McTiernan, a friend of ours, had this party, and we were there, and Dwayne was at the party, and he and I got into this like hour-long argument, like two black men and the only black people in the corner yelling at each other about Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book. And I knew by halfway through that argument that I was gonna be friends with this dude for life. Like, anybody I can scream at about Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, I know, we're down to be down. So I had that's how I met him, right? You've been trying to push it, and I was like, whatever. And then I realized how important that relationship was, because Dwayne and I, when I was at Yale, I didn't feel like, I felt like the world I came from was so different from from my classmates. A lot of those folks had been groomed to be artists ever since they were kids. And the middle class lives that they came from were different from where I came from. And so when I met Dwayne, who had just finished Yale Law School, it was a synergy. It was like someone who got it, who understood. Dwayne was sent to prison at 15 years old. and spent max adult prison at 15 years old and spent almost a decade there. And then came out and did the miraculous thing of graduating from Yale Law School, starting an extraordinary not-for-profit called Freedom Reads, where he builds libraries, goes back into prison and builds libraries now, because reading and poetry specifically was so fundamental to his survival that he feels like it's necessary to go back and do that work. And so we would have these kinds of conversations, Dwayne and I, about our family members who have been locked up, his experience being locked up, my father, all of this kind of stuff. And we started collecting these stories of folks who were in jail but had not actually been charged with anything. And we started doing this research, working with this other organization whose name escapes me right now. But we came to the realization that there are a lot of people in the United States in jail who have been charged with nothing. And they spend sometimes years in jail waiting for someone to hear their case. And so we wanted to try to find a way to acknowledge those people's stories, those people's experiences, because of our family experiences with these issues. And so the only way that we could get information about them was looking at the reports that their lawyers wrote to submit to judges. Sometimes those hadn't been seen yet. And Dwayne, being the lawyer, would interpret those documents. Legalese is complicated. It's very, very complicated. And so at a certain point, we started to realize that in order to understand this, to really absorb what was going on for these folks that we were beginning to talk to and record their stories, we were gonna have to redact out all of this legal language. And Dwayne was assigned with that. And he had this ability to remove it and leave what was poetry. And that is, it's this magic trick, really. And so I ended up doing these portraits of these individuals. And I started stacking the portraits on top of each other to give some kind of privacy to these folks, so you can't fully know who they are, because I don't want to put them on blast like that. But I do want to tell the stories. And so we worked with their lawyers, and we went and photographed them, and this body of work called redaction is that. And so these are those documents redacted down by Dwayne with the legal language. So they exist as prints, etchings, usually about 4 etchings. So the first, I do the drawing of the first figure, then I do the second drawing, and then on top of that, we print the text, and then on top of that, we print the redaction of the text. And so each one of these is actually 4 prints on top of each other. But that's the redaction system.
This then became the basis of one of the high schools in New Haven poetry class, like create poetry by redaction. Okay, so now we're moving into the Titus not escaping the vision of the press. So this was put up in Monticello, the Thomas Jefferson's home. And can you tell the story of how that happened and what happened? I think that was your first big scandal. Big hit.
Darren Walker, who works for the Ford Foundation and has been a major funder of ours at Next Haven, called me up and said, Monticello wants us to give them money to do this project, but I want to make sure they're thinking about all of the things that they need to be thinking about. So I would like to have you offer some work to Monticello. You will be the first artist, contemporary artist, to exhibit work in Jefferson's house. I said yes because it's Darren. I would have said no. In my mind, I was saying, this is a bad idea. This is a really bad idea. And we put up the work, and it was a special event There were a lot of people from Jefferson's descendants who showed up, let me be clear, the Black descendants who showed up and were very excited about what we were doing, felt it was really important. This body of work is a way of memorializing those people on those slave ledgers that I never got a chance to see, and that's what's happening in the tar and all what's going on in the face there. But we put the work up, and I said before the show opened to the curator, I said, I don't live here. I don't have to stay here. You live here. Are you sure that this is what you want to do? And they both were like, this is great, this is important, this is really important. Virginia is progressive now, you have no idea. Okay, all right, okay. So we did the opening. My family and I got out of there as fast as we could. Really raining, it was raining like crazy that day. And then I get a call from the curators before the show was coming to an end, and they said, hey, I just want to let you know, Fox News has got a hold of this painting. They found out what's going on. New York Post has posted this, and we are getting bomb threats at the museum. So we're gonna actually have to bring the work down a little bit earlier than we had expected. In my head, I'm going, I told you from the beginning, but y'all don't want to listen. Progressive. We take the painting down, and it is just another reminder that we have not made the progress that people think that we have made. I don't even know why we continue to pretend like we have. And it is dangerous for folks who look like me to not recognize that progress hasn't actually happened. And I keep finding myself with exhibition opportunities where the institution, the person at the head of the institution is, cutting edge, is very progressive, really does want to make some change. And somehow I'm the fodder. And it's exhausting. Again, this is what I keep saying the same word. I'm tired. And this is part of the reason why I feel like I've got to find some other place to be for a little bit. And I'm obsessed, Jason hates this. I'm obsessed with James Baldwin right now. I'm like reading everything.
I don't hate James Baldwin.
No. So, because Baldwin left him with the main reason why I'm doing the show in Paris. Because Baldwin left him with the Paris, and it was fundamental to him becoming the artist that he ultimately became. Right? But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get to something else in a minute, but this is the time to bring in the fact that you're saying you're stepping back from, you're tired, but you're going to be doing 5 big exhibitions, many of them in the United States, specifically directed against Trump's patriotic education, you're gonna be out there in the next year. So when you say you're stepping back, actually, to me, following you the last year, you're such a private person, you have been doing a lot of this work without making comment on the work. You're about to go through a year where that's gonna change. Do you wanna talk about that a little? Your decision to do that.
So I told you about my practice, how it works, the things I think about when I go to the studio and the things I don't think about when I go to the studio. In the United States, we are bombarded by stupid shit that Donald Trump has said every single day. It's exhausting, it's tiring, it's maddening, and I try very hard to keep it out of my head. I try really, really hard, but it keeps invading. So I'm in the studio sweeping, and the back door is open and a bunch of other shit comes in. And you're like, damn, how did that happen? So you just keep sweeping, and if you're sweeping, you're not making anything. And so that's what I feel like is happening in my head. I'm continually sweeping this stuff out and not capable of making the things that I want to make. And I'm trying to ignore. But then I do this exhibition, I'm a part of this exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery, and all of a sudden, Trump is tweeting about the exhibition that I'm in at the National Portrait Gallery, about these woke artists who don't understand this country, don't love this country, so on and so forth. I'm sweeping, trying to ignore this, but it's like at my front door now, there's nothing that I can do about it. So I do that exhibition and I do a talk, and that becomes a crazy thing at the talk because people are afraid of what's going to happen now that we're talking publicly about these kinds of things. And again, I'm trying really hard to protect my studio time, to make it a kind of sanctuary so I can go through the things that I need to go through in my head to be the person that I want to be in the world. And then he makes this this declaration about this series of sculptures that he's doing, that he's commissioning for the 250th anniversary of the country. And it's garbage. Like, it makes no sense. And at that point, like, I stopped sweeping and saying, it's here. It's here. This shit is here. I have to do something. It's the material in front of me. I have to use this. And maybe in making something, then I can remove it from me. So I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna sit here and make it. And so I had this idea that I was going to do a series of exhibitions in resistance to this declaration. I wasn't gonna change my work. I was actually gonna use a lot of my old work that, you know, can be spoken about from that perspective. And I told my dealer, and I thought maybe 1 or 2 places would be interested in this exhibition, but 5 different museums came back to us and said, we are doing a 250th anniversary resistance. We would love to have Titus come in and do something with that. And so now, you know, I did a little thing at the Metropolitan around this. I'm doing something in Bentonville around this. I'm doing something, another thing in Virginia. Virginia Museum of Fine Art about this, and so yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen, but that has been the nature of, you know, my practice. I do these things, put them out in the world, and then people respond.
Well, I think what you're gonna be doing in this next year is gonna requires a level of bravery that, you know, it's extremely commendable. So, especially because you do have that desire more so than, say, me, to be private. Okay, so I want to end by talking about something, you know, a bit more local, but it's a piece that I love very much. So there was this wave of, once Michael Brown Ferguson happened, some of the students at different universities wanted to bring Black Lives Matter onto campus. And so it first happened at the University of Missouri, and then Yale students, 3 Black philosophy majors, came to me in September 2015 and said, you know, no one has ever seen a Black person on a philosophy syllabus. And so, then this movement started at Yale called Next Yale. And it's really interesting. Yale is completely eliminated. At first, Yale was like, okay, we will work with it. And then they have completely eliminated all memory of it once the alumni freaked out. So the next year, no student had heard of it, even though. So Titus called me. I was giving a talk somewhere in a hotel, and he said, Yale commissioned a piece for the student movement, which then now Yale, like next year, Yale, when backlashes started, they pretended they didn't. So they commissioned this, and Titus said, can you tell me a little bit about what the students are saying? And I said, the students are saying you can go to Yale and not understand Black Lives Matter, because you can graduate from Yale without learning. You learn about Europe, but you don't understand the basis of Black Lives Matter. You don't understand what's going on. You're not taught that. And you said, oh, okay, I get it. Now, do you want to talk through, I'm going to let you take it from here for these new, do you want to say what this painting is?
Yeah, I know we only have a couple more minutes left. This is not the founder of Yale, but the person who Yale is named after, Elihu Yale, and that was because he gave a lot of money. And so this was a painting that was causing a bit of controversy because of the Black figure in the side. I saw this painting a long time ago and was already thinking about ways to work with it. And what I find most frequently is, I told you before, I was attracted to those Black figures that are usually in the corners and the shadows. there's a formal reason why these black figures are in the shadows as well, that is not talked about, but it's that you can actually, black people are capable of taking up this compositional space, but because of what's going on in the time, you don't have to think about them. And so they hold this space without you having to acknowledge their beings. And that's part of the reason. They just become these symbols. So anyway, I was obsessed with this little boy, and I wanted to find out more information about the little boy. And nobody, surrounded by all these historians, could tell me anything about this little boy. And so, every time I would ask another historian about this painting or a historian about this painting, they would go into these dudes here. And I was like, I don't care about that. I want to know about this thing over here. And new scholarship evolves by people asking new questions, right? So if you keep asking the same questions that everybody's asking, then we don't get new scholarship. So I was frustrated. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's important to mention that this was on the wall of the Yale Corporation meeting room. So the Yale Corporation are the super rich people who, tell us what to do, or tell them. We switch pronouns. I'm switching my pronouns. So this was on the wall whenever the corporation met. And that's an enslaved black child with a collar around his neck with a lock on it. So this is the piece Titus did for Yale on commission about the student movement.
So the piece is called Enough About You. Remember what I told you about how I think it's funny too. What I told you about the way they paint black flesh in that time, without blood underneath. And so I chose my friend Dwayne's son to model for that piece. A young boy that's part of my life that I cared about, and painted him as delicately and lovingly as I possibly could, and then framed that, and then let all of the other things fall into the ridges and waves of the rest of the composition that's been crumpled up, as a means of saying, can we please now, can we please? We've had hundreds of years to have this conversation. Can we have this other one? Let's do some research and figure out who this person is. What I will say is, I have seen over the years, like since my TED Talk, scholars beginning to do some amazing research on some of the paintings that I've done, and we're now getting the information about these people. And what we're discovering is it's not impossible to find. Nobody cared to look. And so I'm excited to see that now people are caring to look. So, thanks.
Hello. Oh, awesome. Thank you both so much for that. So awesome. Now we're gonna open up for some Q&A. Just a few little housekeeping rules. Please put your hand up. Please don't speak until a mic is in front of you, because we are recording the talk. And hopefully we can get through everyone. So sorry if that's not the case. But yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please make yourself known so I can pass the mic to you. All right, we already got one person.
Hi guys, thank you. That was amazing. Full disclosure, I'm also a philosopher, so I hope I don't butcher talking about your art.
He was just whispering that to me.
Yeah, I'm out there. I really loved in the beginning when you were talking about abstaining from didacticism, and that when you're in the workshop, it's almost like you're trying to have this experience of communicating with yourself through the artwork. I was wondering if you could say a bit about whether your experience changes once the artwork is finished and it's about to go out into the public. Have you ever changed your mind about what you thought you were doing, or has it changed over time? Because I like this idea of the artwork communicates even when you're in the process of making. You're not trying to communicate something universal or specific like that, yet it does take on these meanings. So I'm wondering about your own experience. Is there a difference between the making and the finished product?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of things. The first thing is I think that there is something special metaphysical that happens in the process of making art. And I want to be open to that. I want to be open to all of that magic. And going back to what I said before, I feel like I quench that magic, quench the revelation from the muses when I'm like, no, this is what this painting's about, this is what we're doing, this is what's supposed to happen. When it's a dialogue, there's more that evolves from that. And then you make it, and then you put it in the world, and at that point, it gains a different life. It gains a different life from the energy of other people's experiences in front of that work. And for me, that's an opportunity to learn. You know, the George Washington piece with the shreds, I knew what I was doing. I didn't realize that people were gonna see that as aggressive. I knowing the reference, the historical reference, the idea that people would be like, oh my God, this is incredibly aggressive, was a bit of a surprise to me at first. And something that I just have to live with. I don't have any control of what people think of that. So yeah, what you make in the studio is different once it gets into the world, and you have zero control of other people's ability to think about what you've made. It's just not gonna happen. There's no way. So it's a losing battle. I'm trying to find out.
One quick comment on that. Titus, at the time you told me, I mean, you deliberately hid what it exactly was. It was tricky to figure out what those strips were. So, I mean, I think
they're on the surface of the painting.
I know, but there was no, I've talked to people who looked at it.
Oh, you mean that I didn't put the information beside the painting?
Correct.
Yeah, because that again, like, if you want to have a conversation about the painting, I'm more inclined to ask you what you think first, and then let you ask me what I was thinking, and then we can engage in the dialogue. But I don't want to put that there and be like, you must think this about the thing that I made. That's not interesting for me. I know what I was thinking. I'm very curious what you were thinking.
You have a question over here.
Speaking of curiosity, I think your painting evokes such curiosity in regards to audiences gleaning at them and making meaning through what you have created in these gorgeous, amazingly inspiring pieces. I'm curious to know, when you think of positioning blackness and understanding the 49 parallel in relation to African Canadians who also have a huge Caribbean diasporic presence, as well as West, East, North, South African, I'm curious to know, first of all, what inspires you to create such vivid, powerful portraits that have such magnetizing impact on audiences, first of all? And second of all, how do you contemplate the different layers and complexities of blackness from a diasporic perspective in regards to reading your painting?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just recognizing that a lot of the Black characters that I am representing in these paintings are not African Americans, right? That in many cases, these are folks who are from Africa. In many cases, these are folks who are from the Caribbean. In many cases, folks from Haiti. And you know, we can talk about historically when it makes reasonable sense to refer to these people as African Americans, right? They were Africans who were stolen and brought here and so on and so forth and blah, blah, brought there. So see, sounds good. I'm here too. Let us not forget.
We are.
And so I do think about that, but also I'm really interested in the portrait. I'm really interested in the faces and the features and the characteristics of Black people. And there is a diversity of Black people on the continent, right? Look, so many different races, so many different things happening. And so from a just purely formal point of view, there is that. There is my interest in the beauty of Black skin and representing Black skin and painting Black skin. That always brings me to think about the diaspora. It's not just the United States. And again, that actually connects to part of the reason why I'm interested in being in other places, in this same skin in other places, and seeing how I interpret myself in those locations. It's different. I'm imagining it's going to be different in every single one of those places. I hope that answers the question.
You have a question here?
Thank you so much for the conversation. So I'm curious, has another person ever said anything or done anything that has ruined your own experience of one of your pieces for you?
No, but they've said something that made me go, what the hell? Like, you know, I want to be open to people's experience of the work. And it's really easy to get defensive sometimes when people go all the way out of left field. But there was an occasion where a person didn't come to me with this, but wrote about this. And the person said they went to one of my exhibitions and that my painting was advocating the rape of white women. And I was like, I don't know what evil creature you think I am, but like, I also don't understand how you got that from the painting, right? So I wish that I could have had a conversation with that person to be like, let's talk about your upbringing. Like, do you have a good relationship with your mother and father? Can you help me understand how you've come to this? Like, that kind of thing most definitely happens. Like, and that's the risk that you take. Being willing to allow people to sit with their experience of the work. But even as upsetting as that made me, it also inspired new work in the studio. Because I had to come to the conclusion that was in his head. Why was that in his head? What is he afraid? Something that he saw in that image frightened him. It was a painting of a black man, and there was a white woman in front of him. Period. That was it. They were clothed. I don't understand how he came to that conclusion, but it helps me to recognize all of those lies that we were taught, all of the racist ideas that have become a part of the fabric, specifically of the United States, that get woven into people's thoughts about the things that they see that I make. So I think that's the closest thing to what you're describing.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. What an amazing artist you are. And you know, we're willing to welcome you to Canada if you want to stay here. We're nice people.
I've been thinking about that.
I'm just
Y'all got a
saying.
problem with this cold weather. I mean, as soon as you figure that out, I got you.
It goes away in March.
I'll be back in March.
Okay. You talk about the pain and sort of just the frustration that you have to deal with each and every time, you know, with your art over the years. And we know that, you mentioned James Baldwin, who I love very much, and another artist I really like is Frida Kahlo. And both really explain and describe their pain through their art form. And a lot of what's been researched about them talks about their pain, both physical, mental, all of that. How do you deal with it? You mentioned about the sweeping when you walk into your studio or when you're in your studio. What other strategies do you use to manage your, pain, as you mentioned, the progression and regression of American politics and how that impacts race and how race is such a big part of that? Yeah. That's the first part of my question. The second is, if Mr. Baldwin was alive, what question would you ask him if you haven't had, or questions if you had an afternoon with him? Get you a little bit of tea or coffee, you know.
Wow.
In Paris.
Wow, it definitely is. Wow. I'm gonna have to think on that one. Let's start with the other one. The answer to the first question is I don't know. And that's part of what this whole next stage of my practice is, because I don't think I'm managing it well. I don't think it's good. I feel it in my body in a way that I didn't feel it when I was younger. And I find myself more frustrated than I've ever been. And I'm a pretty joyous person. And the fact that it's impacting me in that way is not okay. And I want to work that out. And so that's where I am right now, trying to figure out how to work that out. But the other thing is that I want to know what it's like to paint about joy. That's the exercise right now. I have experienced so many of these painful things. And that has, I've used my practice to kind of, I don't know, excise it from me, like bring it from the inside out so that at least I could observe it. But I'm a pretty happy person, you know? And I want to find a way to let the paintings find their joy. And I don't know what that looks like. I really don't. And so one of the things that I've been doing obsessively is drawing. Like, I pretty much don't leave without my sketchbook. It's on the floor over there. Like, I'm constantly drawing. And part of the drawing practice is one about keeping my hand moving. It's a sort of meditation. But it's also a way of making stuff that I don't overthink. And it just makes me happy. That's it. I don't know that they're great pieces of art. I don't even really care. It just makes me happy. I'm trying to figure out how to translate that into the paintings. It's not to say I'll never make, you know, the kinds of paintings I make about pain or suffering or whatever, but I want to spend some time just painting about joy.
Sorry, the James Baldwin.
Oh,
10 seconds.
So I'm reading a bunch of Baldwin right now, and I feel like I've had so many conversations with him because of the things that I'm reading right now. This is a sad question, but I think the question would be, and it was actually the first question that came to me, was it worth it? In many ways, Baldwin sacrificed his life to the public, right? And experienced so much criticism and attack, and watched so many of his friends die, attacked by in a variety of different ways. But you know, Martin, Malcolm, and I mean, just so many of his friends, close people, died fighting the good fight. And at this point in my life, I'm almost 50. I'm just going, man, is it worth it? Like, in the end, like, I so appreciate the sacrifice that you gave to us. But did you have your life? You're such a public critic. Like, we are so blessed for what you gave us, but that's selfish. I feel selfish. Like, what about, like, you? Was it worth it? Or would you have done it differently? So, I mean, I think about that question a lot, with a lot of, you know, so-called public figures in the resistance.
Thank you. I think we'll do, how many hands do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm up.
And I'll be faster with that.
Yeah,
So, you know,
okay, I'm gonna start here, there.
And if you gotta go, you gotta go. I'm not gonna be offended. You've been here for a while, so if you have to get up and walk out, you're not hurting my feelings. Peace.
Okay, my question is about Next Haven, actually. What was kind of your motivation, or like the beginning seeds of why you started Next Haven? And it's obviously a very like unique model that is kind of in this hybrid place of like nonprofit, but still like building a market for the artist, and obviously your relationship with like Gagosian and that also helping it. Like, was that already something you thought about when you were building Next Haven, or was it something that evolved as the organization is growing? And what's your eventual like vision of it being successful?
All right, I'm gonna be succinct. Okay. So I watched one of my paintings get auctioned off for an extraordinary amount of money, and it surprised me. I'm not in this for that. I've never been making paintings for the purpose of making money. I'm trying to figure out this thing that we've talked about. And so I remember calling my mother and saying to her, I can't believe these people are paying this kind of money for my artwork. I don't think my work is worth it. It's crazy what's going on. This is weird. That's not why I make what I make. And my mother, in her way, was like, boy, what's wrong with you? Like what these people do with their money has nothing to do with you. It's about what you do with your money. So how are you going to bring what you got back to your community? By, right? So like, that's my mother, and she's amazing. And so that's what got me thinking about this, about, okay, I've done this thing successfully in the art world, quote unquote successfully. How can I have some impact on my community? Because I don't feel comfortable in the art world like that. Jason said, I'm pretty private. My family stuff from over here, and then I go do my opening and I go back to the studio. I'd much rather be in the studio at any given moment. So that's kind of how it started. And then there was this last part of the question, which was
Like your vision for
the vision is that Next Haven is a model. It's currently in New Haven, but it's a model. It's a model that goes into places that have been disinvested in and uses art as a vehicle to help uplift those communities. Any real estate developer will tell you that arts in a place actually is beneficial to that place and brings people into rent and stuff, but artists are rarely the people who benefit from that. So Next Haven is an opportunity for the artists to actually benefit from that and to uplift the community at the same time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your work. Really appreciate you being here in Canada. I was just thinking in terms of music, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the influence of music in your work, specifically jazz, the canon of jazz, the canon of individuals that have come before us playing music, Coltrane, and so on. So just wondered if you could talk about that.
So I was a musician before I was making famous. So I'm a bass player. Music was the thing that made me realize that I had something to give. I did really poorly in school, and academically I failed at pretty much everything I put my hand on. But music was a place where I felt like I can do that, and I can do that well. And so, I'm constantly listening to music in the studio when I'm working on a piece. My wife gets upset at me sometimes because I get obsessed with a song, a single song. And I would play that song over and over and over and over again, trying to understand every nuance, every chord change. Like, what is that lyric related to in that? I'm obsessed in that way. In terms of the greats, Miles Davis is probably one of my favorites. I'm interested in not just the music, but his career. That is somebody who through generations kept evolving, never stayed the same, pissed off a bunch of people because he wouldn't just keep doing what they wanted him to do. I want to be that guy.
Hi, Titus.
Hi.
Thank you for being here and talking to us today. I wanted to ask, what advice would you have for an up-and-coming artist on how to gain exposure?
Ooh. It's interesting because I don't know that I know how to answer that question here. The art world in the United States is it feels very closed. And I know that my career would not be what it was if I hadn't gone to Yale. I felt totally out of place, didn't know how I was going to pay for it, but it wasn't that Yale taught me something. I don't believe that. I always tell people I don't believe that Yale makes great artists. Yale picks great artists, and those people who have the endurance and the rigor to survive it go off and do well, not because there's something special about Yale. But it put me in conversation with people, a community of people who were as invested in their craft as I was. And that was the first time in my artistic practice that I had found that. And that energy pushed me on. In terms of exposure, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on social media, I have zero social media. I am not the guy to talk about that. I actively resisted. My children, my teenage boys think I'm insane. But I just can't. I'm reading this book that I don't agree with everything in the book, but I think it's a fascinating book. And it's called Art in the Age of Artifice. And I don't agree with everything. We argued about this last night. But I think it's fascinating. And he creates these two, I'm not gonna get into that because we don't have a lot of time. But what I will say is this: I think the most important thing is to actually focus on your craft, the thing that you want to make, and make everything every single mistake that you need to make in order to excel. One of my mentors said to me, if everything you make succeeds, he said this, okay? So, this is his language, not my mind. If everything you make succeeds, you're not fucking trying hard enough. Fail a little bit. Try some things that don't work and keep on making it. In terms of getting out into the market, my experience is that it really, unfortunately, is about relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last question.
Hi Titus, great talk. I was wondering, I have two questions. I was wondering first about how you noticed that there's not really life or blood or the reds that you talked about in old paintings with Black people.
Yes.
And then the second question is kind of how you decipher between adding life in your figures through color and things of that nature, and then maybe taking it away. For example, with the whiteout paintings or the cutout paintings. So yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, the whiteout paintings the whitewash paintings are so much about erasure, about the fact that these people, these characters are being erased from history, that, I'm finding them after, years of search. Should have known them from the very beginning of my practice, but not. The life is started with actually painting from life, right? Not painting from photograph, but painting from life. It's a different thing. We get really used to, any painters in the room? Yes, my people. So we get really used to painting from photograph, and there's a whole style of painting that works with photograph, and that's wonderful, it's amazing. But when you go stand in front of a Velasquez painting, what you're not going to say is that looks like a photograph. What you're going to say is that looks like a life. The dog looks like it's gonna step up and walk out of the canvas, and that happens from observing life. And so what the revelation occurred for me, the more I started painting portraits from life and realizing there is a thing, a reflection off the surface of the skin. There's warmth under the lips. There's so much that's happening that is not reflected in these paintings of Black people. And as I started working with this conservator to understand the process of making paintings a little bit better, one of the things that became very clear, it's because Black people weren't commissioning these paintings. They weren't the person paying the bill, and therefore they didn't need to be represented in a way that was reflective of their humanity. It's very, very rare to find that happens. Now, Sir Joshua Reynolds has a painting that he does where there's a person behind it, and you'll notice it. You'll be at the museum and say, okay, that looks like a caricature, that looks like a caricature, that looks like a caricature. Wait, that's a person. That is somebody. And I made a painting about it, and like I told you, the historian started doing work, and it was amazing. And what did we discover? We discovered that Sargent worked with this young man who modeled for the painting. He knew him. He had an experience with him. So when he represented him, he was representing that person that he had a relationship with. So it was like the observation of painting from life that made me realize that's what was lacking in these other compositions.
Fantastic.
Whoa. Thank you so much, Jason and Titus. This was incredible.
Wow, amazing.
All right.
Very good.
Yes. So good.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I saw your work years ago at the Brooklyn Museum. First time I saw it. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great to hear you speak.
Thank you.
Look, it's Jeune. I haven't seen you in so long.
It's been years. I'm in Alabama now. So.
Oh, okay. American. Well, you're in his territory, right?
No, he's a good friend. So.
Going through all this stuff that you're going through. Yeah,
but
cool.
It's
Yeah,
good stuff.
good.
I mean,
good.
I'm mostly remote though, so I'm technically in Alabama, but
Yeah.
working.
Are you creating still?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. This is my
How are you?
brother.
Great question.
My sister.
How are you? We don't ever miss you. Like, never miss a beat.
No.
Yeah, for real. Recording for the archive.
Well, you know, I have my own way. They're doing it, but I do it because I do it a particular way, and then usually people here want my copy because their copy is a bit more institutional, get done, whereas I do close-ups, and, you know, it's my own little twist on it all.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great.
I didn't ask.
Brilliant, eh? Like every answer, brilliant. That's why I can't, you know, I was only gonna do the beginning, and then of course I wasn't even sure I had enough space. This might be running out even as I speak, but for some reason the space was held. Because sometimes, you know, abruptly cuts off. So I'm grateful. So let me see if it's still. Oh yeah, it's still running. So you're hearing all this. Incredible, incredible. All right, so I'm gonna cut it off now. It's beautiful.
Take a picture of me next to this.
Sure, yes.
A nice one.
A nice one? You want it vertical or horizontal? Probably horizontal so you get you, yeah. Go on the other side. On the other side. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Ah, yes. Check it and make sure.
So much. This was so appetizing with a lot of color.
I love how you say that. Appetizing,
I'm
a lot of
poet,
color.
I'm a poet.
What's your name?
Monica.
Monica.
Bristol.
Bristol.
Uh-huh.
Oh, what's your background, heritage?
I'm from Guyana.
Guyana. And where you publish? Are you publishing your work?
I got little things in anthologies, but you know, I haven't done a lot of it. I just work on it. I'm 74.
Yeah, and
so I retired. I worked at UFT for 35 years.
Okay.
And retired from there. And after that, I did a bit of, you know, literacy, teaching and stuff like that. And then I got into art.
Ah.
And so I do a lot of art. I take courses here as well.
Right.
So I'm really, and I'm very creative. I work with things like, from my kitchen, like, you know, the cinnamon bark. I've done artwork and acrylic, that with acrylic.
Right.
Cinnamon bark.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
And your name?
Douglas Stewart.
Douglas Stewart. And you work here?
No, I'm just an art enthusiast who go to things and often document and record because I think it's so brilliant that we have all of this provenance right here in this city. Yes. Yes.
It's really healthy. It's really healthy. Very cathartic.
Yes. It's valuable.
Yeah.
Valuable.
Nice meeting you.
You too.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Did you check to make sure they're okay? Just make sure. I don't want you to get home and go, what is the nonsense he just did?
That's lovely.
Yes. So you're there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a good weekend. Stay warm.
That's our mantra throughout the winter. All right, so let's. I kept it on for that little moment. All right.
I want to read this.
It's cool. Oh, Bushra stepped. The next generation, the next wave. Gotta end on y'all. So you have to say bye.
Sorry?
You have to say bye.
Let's see you soon, very soon.
I love that ring every time I see that ring.
Huh?
I love that ring every time I see that ring.
Yes. Mr. Marley. I'm trying to get my Jamaica ring back, but they sold out. I have to get one.
Yeah.
All right. Done.